Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Guest. I'm the business editor of The Economist. I'm in charge of our coverage of business around the world. I'm very pleased to welcome here on the panel, we have David Neeleman, the founder and CEO of Azul Airlines, the low-cost airline, who's also the founder of JetBlue, an American low-cost airline, has been bringing his experience from America to Brazil. And also Emerson Andrade, the founder of Peixe Urbano, a sort of online website for getting discount deals. And we're here to discuss how Brazil is able to connect to the rest of the world, how the movement of people with experience overseas into Brazil is bringing innovation to the country and boosting the economy. So I think what I'd like to start by doing, as David is sitting nearest to me, if you could just give a very brief summary of what you were doing in America and why you decided to come to Brazil. And I'll do the same thing for Emerson, and then I'm going to throw in some questions and keep it going.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? This thing's kind of funny. Olá, gente. Tudo bem? So, I was born in São Paulo, and my dad was a journalist there. And, I've always had a great love for Brazil. I don't know if it was because I was born here. I came back as a missionary for my church, learned how to speak Portuguese again, had forgotten it. And so when I was, ran several airlines, started several airlines, WestJet in Canada, Morris Air, JetBlue. I just always wanted to do something in Brazil. I always had this dream to come to Brazil, and I always thought that, the Brazilian economy was built for kind of the A and B class. And as I was here as an expatriate child, I thought Brazil was a completely different country than what I found when I came back here as a missionary. So I fiquei chateado. I was a little upset that there was so many people that were outside the economy. So I thought, well, what greater way to introduce people to the economy than airfares? And so they weren't using Brazilian-made airplanes, which was interesting, the incumbent carriers here. We launched the Brazilian-made airplane at JetBlue. So you had this convergence of, a market that really needed it, fares that were really high. People weren't participating in the airline business. Brazil had one of the lowest per capita rates of air travel in the world for a country its size. Twice as many people in Argentina.
And for a country that's so big.
Yeah, with lack of trains.
People don't fly from one part of Belgium to another very often, but here, man.
We didn't have trains. We had long distances. Buses were very expensive, and they still are. There was very little, so we had an issue of really high airfares and really lousy, ability to go from place to place. It was really connecting traffic mainly, unless you lived in São Paulo and some Rio. So we raised some money, and I put some money in myself and came down, started the business, and we went, our third year of operation, we did $1 billion. We went from 0 to $1 billion in sales. We're now the third largest airline in Brazil. We have a 10% market share and growing. Our competitors are having some difficulties, and they're shrinking a little bit, and we're continuing to grow. So it's been a great success for us, and not without its challenges. And I think a lot like the previous speaker was talking about, there is certainly opportunities here and there's challenges here, and they kind of balance each other out in a sense. But I think the opportunities are greater than the challenges.
That's great. I'm going to move across to Emerson now. Emerson, perhaps I could ask you the same question. Tell us a little bit about what you did and then why you came back to Brazil.
Sure. Boa tarde. So I'm originally from Curitiba in the south, and I decided in 2005 to go to the U.S. to get my a graduate degree. So I went to the Stanford University to get my MBA. So I studied there for 2 years, and I graduated in 2007, and decided to stay for some more time in the U.S. Went to work for Microsoft in Seattle, where I spent the next three years. So in 2010, we're talking about now a little bit more than 2 years ago, like in January 2010, a classmate of mine from Stanford, Julio, he called me and said, look,
The Brazilian
yeah,
classmate
he's
from Stanford.
Brazilian, though he had been in the US for 11 years by that time. So he went to college and also business school then with me. So he said, Emerson, I'm going back to Brazil. I've been looking into ideas to take to Brazil. And I was more specifically looking into something we could do more like with the local market. So he explored first, one of the ideas was something like a website in the US called Service Magic, which is recommendations for electricians and service like that. But in the end, he found that group buying was something that was growing a lot in the US, and nobody was doing this in Brazil, like a website with a daily deal that has a deep discount where people have 24 to 48 hours to buy that discount in services like restaurants, hotels, salons, and then he said, Emerson, do you want to go back to Brazil and then let's launch this business there? So initially, I was not really thinking about coming back to Brazil at that point. But after spending a month with him in March 2010 working here, I realized that the potential was huge. So I decided to come back. I quit my job at Microsoft. And then we formed this team. We're three founders, Julio, myself, and Alex. Alex is Alex is American, but grew up in Asia. So I think it's very aligned with what we're going to discuss here about migration and people moving. So the three of us had experience abroad. We had connections in the U.S. And what happened in the next 2 years since we founded Peixe Urbano, the company grew pretty fast. I mean, we started with 3 people. We are now 1,000 people. So there was a lot of hiring these last 2 years. I spent a lot of time interviewing. And we are today present in 6 countries: Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, Colombia, and Peru. And we are still with a lot of growth. We see a lot of growth ahead, but we're working a lot to organize the company because of the growth was so fast that we need a lot of process in place. And for that, we're also using a lot of expertise from people from abroad. We can talk more about it later.
Well, and this brings me to my next question, which again is addressed to both of you in turn. Start with David. I mean, what did you learn in America? I mean, you're running airlines for some time there. What did you learn there, and how easy or otherwise was it to apply those lessons to the Brazilian market?
There's, I mean, what I always say is that, Brazil has great attributes. Its people, its culture, its the fun culture that they have here. The United States is, a little bit more, just take the airline industry. I mean, we've certainly had an enormous amount of growth. There's 750 million people that travel a year in the United States and 50 million people that traveled in Brazil. And so our utilization of resources, our efficiency models, the depth and breadth of our management teams, the utilization of promotions and yield management and schedule planning, all of that expertise. And when you do it, so many more times a day, and you're subject to intense competition from a lot of different sectors, from a lot of different competitors, and then looking in Brazil, it was a very it was a duopoly in this market, and there was only 2 airlines that had 90% of the market, and so when you had to have a duopoly, your costs aren't as good, your service isn't as good, your offerings aren't as good, because you just don't have that hunger to be able to get better. So a lot of the things that we learned, at JetBlue, growing up in New York City, fighting with Delta, fighting with American, fighting with Continental, becoming the largest airline in New York after 8 years after we started up. I took a hand-picked group of executives. I brought 10 executives with me, hired a Brazilian team, an American team. We worked really closely together. And so just so many lessons that we learned there. And then we took kind of the best of what Brazil has to offer, the best of what the United States, best practices, and we put them together. But I think generally the pace in the United States, business is just a little bit quicker. I mean, things just happen a little bit faster. It's just more competition, you just have to be a little bit better to be able to stay on top. And so when you bring that, environment to Brazil, you can have some success.
Okay. Emerson, what have you found? I mean, what did you learn at Microsoft, or what did you learn observing the way the online market changes so fast in America, and how did you manage to apply that here?
I think one of the most important things for me was, besides Microsoft, I can mention something about that as well, but the 2 years I spent at Stanford, which is in the heart of the Silicon Valley, exposed to so many leaders in the tech market. I mean, I had classes with Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google. I had classes with Meg Whitman, who at that time was the CEO of eBay. I was just seeing like people starting businesses. I remember attending a class with the founders of YouTube. They had just sold YouTube to Google. So all the exposure to ideas, to people that are talking all the time about technology and startups and taking risk and not being afraid of failure. So that was something that inspired me a lot. I mean, when you look at the Silicon Valley, people there, the entrepreneurs are not really afraid of trying something, of launching a company, and everybody knows that you can fail, but at some point you can find something, an idea, and execute well and succeed. So I think that was very encouraging for me when I thought about coming back to Brazil and taking this risk of bringing my entire family here and starting something that I didn't know it was going to work, but I knew that at least I was going to learn a lot, even if the business failed. So I think it's something a little bit intangible. It's not exactly like something I learned, but it's something I felt and I incorporated. And when I left Microsoft, when I left Stanford and went to Microsoft, I knew that at some point I wanted to launch a company, I launched a business. And Microsoft, what was interesting was I was working at a tech company that has now 30 years in the market. So it's interesting to see how things evolve. And when I compare today Peixe Urbano, which is a 2-year-old company with 1,000 people, to Microsoft, which is a 30-year-old company with 100,000 people, what I try to do is take Peixe Urbano in a way that the processes and organization and things are going to be into place like Microsoft is today, because there's a lot of chaos. We always said in the first year mainly of the Peixe Urbano that we had this organized chaos because things are happening so fast. So what we're trying to do is organize things and organize processes and put elements into place so that the company continues growing with more looking more into productivity and efficiency than just growing in any direction we can.
Okay. I mean, how
when I speak to business schools in the United States and I find Brazilians, I teach a class at Yale and Harvard and more on the East Coast, and I've taught Professor Peterson's class at Joel Peterson at Stanford many times, and I find Brazilians, I say, volte para Brasil, cara, tem oportunidade dessa lá. There's lots of opportunity in Brazil, get back there, what are you doing here? So, but it's really important, I think. It's interesting, though, because when we have several members of our management team that are Brazilians that went to MBA school in the United States, and then they had work experience in the United States, and they came back. They're very valuable because they just understand the different pace, and they understand a little bit of a broader view of things. So I think it's important to get that work experience, but the opportunity really is here in Brazil.
I mean, how easy do you both find it to get the talent? I mean, to get either Brazilians to come here or foreigners. I mean, Brazilians who live abroad to come here or foreigners to come here. I mean, what are the challenges there?
They're huge. I mean, in our industry is just not that big. We have really two airlines. There's a few other small ones, but to get someone as you make management decisions on replacing this person or whatever. In the United States, you'd say, well, this guy's not doing a great job, but what's the alternative? There'd be 100 people in line to take that job in the United States, and there may not be one here. And so salaries are much higher here than what we'd pay in the United States in all sectors. When our bank here, Banco Pine's opening an office in New York, And they came back saying, wow, we can hire people for so much cheaper in New York than we can here in Brazil. So I guess that speaks to really I think the growth of the economy, the management and the expertise has to really catch up. And certainly if you bring expatriates here, there's all kinds of problems with that. It's very expensive and they want to go home all the time. And so, that's not, the answer either. So, I mean, it's a temporary answer, but it's not a permanent answer. So I don't know what your
in our case,
experience is.
we're having a relative success in bringing people from abroad, both from the U.S. and also from other countries. We have people working with us from Argentina, from Colombia. We had some.
Oh yeah,
guy from
Argentines
India.
want to live in Brazil for sure.
Yeah, sure. But we do have
Colombians, Bolivians.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Bolivia.
We do have 4 or 5 Americans who came with us. Luke Kohler is here as well, one of the directors in our team. He just recently went in a tour, went to visit several universities in the U.S. And thanks to that, we're bringing. I don't know, Luke, if you're around, how many people are coming, but we're bringing a few engineers. And also some people for summer internship this year. So I think people...
Summer internship? Yeah. Copacabana Beach or wherever. Sure.
I mean, you mentioned the idea of Brazilians having a bit more of a fear of failure than, I mean, in America, certainly in Silicon Valley, the assumption is if you haven't failed, you probably haven't tried very hard.
Yeah.
You haven't had sufficient ambition, and that failure is the thing you do first before you figure out how to do something really big. I mean, why? I mean, presumably there's people will feel that joining a startup, a company that wasn't around 10 years ago, is risky. That there's, maybe their parents will tell them that, well, how do you know that company is still going to be there in 5 years' time? Do you find that a problem here, or?
We found that a problem in the very beginning, yes. I mean, until a year ago, like the first year, myself and the 2 co-founders had a lot on our shoulders because it was very hard to convince someone to work in a startup that was just starting. And today things are a little bit better. We had success. We grew a lot. We had investment from some very large firms such as Morgan Stanley, T. Rowe. So today people look at us and say, hey, this is a startup, but it's succeeding, it's growing, and it's getting attention from abroad as well. So it's a little bit better. But yeah, for sure, people tend to prefer a public service job sometimes than working for a startup.
Well, I think just the fact that you're having to go to the United States and recruit people to come down here shows that there's, you're having trouble finding, all things being equal, you'd rather have Brazilians in those jobs.
Right.
But you have to go to the United States to get them. So it shows that there's a lot of opportunity here for Brazilians that can be trained properly, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw it open to the audience now. I cannot see a thing because of the lights that are blinding me, but if you can sort of, raise your hand if you have any questions, and state, who you're addressing it to, and get the attention of someone with a microphone. I simply cannot see whether there are hands up there at the moment.
There's one over here.
Okay, great.
Hey, Hussam from Established Brazil. Guys, you're talking all time about problems, especially bringing people from outside because of the power force here. And what's the solutions? I mean, what you're proposing for government or for other companies as solution?
Well,
That's it.
There's lots of solutions. I think from our perspective, it's just interesting. I mean, I was born here, went there, grew up in business there, and came back here. When you go to the United States, on one hand, during the financial crisis, everybody was there. Oh, why did I buy 3 houses? Why do I have 5 cars? Oh my gosh, I'm so in debt. You come here, and someone's saying, wow, I just got my first house. I got my first apartment. I've been paying on it for 3 years. So it's exciting. There's an excitement about Brazil. But then, now, during this political season, everyone's talking about taxes and reducing debt, and the government needs to pull back their taxes, and then you come here to Brazil and they just keep adding more and more taxes, and government spending is, has doubled in the last 8 years or so. So I don't think there is an appreciation here in this, at least in the government, and understanding that the more you tax people even though they don't complain, heclamar, like they do in the United States, that it's having a really negative effect on the economy. I know every time we turn around, last year our airport fees rose 300%. This year our navigation fees rose 150%. They're collecting another 400 million reais. Now they want to put a connection fee on every customer of 8 reais. It will, and just to be able to, increase the value of the privatized airports. And so, I guess I would say if, the advice I'd give government is, don't see taxing as a way to help the economy. This is a very, by U.S. standards, a very socialistic economy. And I think, what Europe's proven is, you can't leave your people in the lurch. Obviously, Bolsa Familiar is a good program, but you also need to let, consumers make that, a fifth as much as they make in the United States. They pay twice as much for just about everything, and then they're taxed, VAT taxes, SEMS. Yeah, sometimes I marvel at how the economy even works sometimes, because it's kind of like, is there any money left for anyone to buy an airline ticket? I worry about that, but they still show up like crazy. So I think just understanding, don't tax airports and airlines. This is not class A and B. This is class C people traveling, because the money you'll make from them creating business and creating stuff will be, by a bigger economy, will be much better than just taxing the small economy you have here today.
Super. Emerson, really briefly, what's the one thing you think the government can do better here?
Well, I was going to answer more what we're doing to help a little bit
Okay.
on this. Since I think what Brazil is missing is a little bit of examples of companies that started like small, grew, and had success, and maybe one day IPO'd or something like that. What we're trying to do now, since we got to this point, is we're participating in many events about entrepreneurship, technology, trying to convince people that it's nice to take a risk and go ahead and do something on themselves. And more recently, we met the governor here of Rio, Sergio Cabral, and asked him, hey, what can you do to help us, like make Rio like this Brazilian Silicon Valley, where we have more companies like Peixe Urbano, and so that create a lot of jobs and stimulate the economy as well. So I mean, our job is really, I mean, be a good example, grow as much as we can, and participate in a lot of events, trying to show people that it's doable. You can do it here in Brazil, and maybe that will stimulate others to do the same.
Well, one thing you can do for sure, that, according to the Wall Street Journal, a price per bit of internet in Sao Paulo is 10 times what it costs in New York City. So it's pretty tough to have a company like Peixe Urbano grow to the extent that it could be if people are paying 10 times per bit more than they pay in New York. So, and part of the reason is they tax internet service 100%. So it's like
That's
bad
incredible.
policy. Don't tax the internet 100%. Figure out different ways to make money, but this commerce thing is not something that makes good public policy.
That's extraordinary. We have time for another question. Again, yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Carlos. I'm the commercial attaché of the Colombian government here in Brazil. Emerson, thank you for investing in Colombia, and we will support you forever. And David, after working 14 years in the airline industry, I work for American. What's the secret behind a low-cost airline in such an expensive country?
Well, it's tough to have low costs when you're paying $4.50 a gallon for gasoline. The carriers in the U.S. pay $3. We pay $4.50 a gallon. One more thing we pay more for in Brazil. But I think the secret is you have to be very, very efficient. You have to just have a minimalist approach. Safety is number one. But we have about 80 employees per aircraft. TAM has 185. GOL has 140 employees per aircraft. So we do use a lot of technology, turn our planes quickly, keep them in the air. So those things that we can affect, the non-fuel expenditures, we have very, very low costs. And then, I think what's really critically important when you start a business, and this goes for, Peixe Urbano or any other business, what are you going to do for your customers that's different than anyone else is doing, and how difficult is it to be replicated? And so we looked at all these markets that didn't have air service, cities that had no commercial air service, nonstop service that didn't exist between cities. Today, 60% of all of our routes, we have no nonstop competition. We're the only guys flying it. And so, you know, you can control prices. And so we go into these airports. We're kind of the Walmart of an airport. We come in, we set up shop, we put 5 flights a day in, we take all the business, we plug them into a network that takes them all through Brazil. So it's just creating something that's very, very difficult to duplicate and doing it on kind of our own terms instead of trying to duplicate what other people are doing.
Excellent. We probably have time for one more question. Over there.
Yeah, hello, hello. My name is Dario. I have a quite simple question. I understand the Azul name for an airline company, but my question is for Emerson. And why did you call your company Peixe Urbano? And the second one is how do you will you translate it for the rest of the Latin American countries? So thank you for your answer.
Sure.
Is that Spanish too?
We call it Peixe Urbano in all the countries. And the idea came from, first we were thinking about an animal. We think people could remind well an animal. But then we thought, well, what is the animal that, what are the animals that are together, they go in group? So fish, okay. And then first name was like Peixe Gordo, but some people felt it was not really good. So our communication director today, she said, why not something that is, I mean, we're having these people that they buy an offer and they go as a group to a restaurant, then they go to a hotel, then they go to a salon. So they are actually swimming in the city. They are urbans. Urban fishes. So that's why we call it then Peixe Urbano. This group of people exploring the city.
In groups, yeah.
Yeah, in groups.
That was a fantastic presentation. Can we just close with one thought from each of you on, you know, what do you think could change in the Brazilian mindset to make the country more open to ideas from the outside? Just very briefly, both of you, starting with David.
You know, I think there's just huge amounts of opportunity here. I mean, I know a couple of guys that started a company here called baby.com.br. A couple of guys in business school said, you know, diapers.com in the United States, raised a couple $1 million, came down here, didn't speak Portuguese, and now started this company. I think it's doing well and being successful. So, you know, I think when there's a group of people in Brazil that are paying 2 to 3 times as much for every single thing they buy, and if you can't come down here and figure out how to make money, then you're just not very smart. And so I think there's just huge opportunity, and you know, don't be afraid of you know, a lot of some of the hurdles that there are here, because the Brazilian people need it. You know, they need to be able to have better products and better service and lower cost things for better price. And I think the opportunity exists in a lot of different sectors. You know, banking is very expensive. They make a ton of money. So I think the technology can enable a lot of these things to happen at a lot higher pace. So I think the future is really bright here for Brazil.
Excellent. Emerson, you've got 1 minute.
I think I cannot recommend anything different than what I did. I think it's very important people put value in education and go, if they can, get some education abroad, get some experience there, and come back here. Because here the opportunities are really present. What people need just is what I've been talking throughout this presentation is know that there are risks in things, but when you risk on something, even if you fail, you learn a lot. You can just take that experience to the next level. We do this inside the company. I mean, we try a lot of things inside Peixe Urbano that don't work, and we learn from that, and we do it better next time. So I think that's the culture people need to develop here in Brazil. It's okay to try and fail and learn, and then do it again until you succeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David and Emerson. We're now going to have on the stage Oscar Metzavet, who's going to talk. He's the founder of Osklen, and he's going to talk about the new luxury. So thank you very much, everybody.